Well, welcome, Glenn. It's brilliant to have you on the second episode of Only Connect, our new Bonded podcast. Really appreciate how supportive you've been of Bonded over the past 4 years since our inception back in July 21. And perhaps, for our audience, just take a moment just to introduce yourself and what you do. I know a running theme behind our conversations aligns very much to the importance of connection, which is very important to us at Bonded, and that plays very much into your professional and personal life as well, I believe. So yeah.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Great to be here. I can't believe it's been nearly 4 years. I think we first met probably 6 years ago or so, and at the time I was in a commercial role in a water retailer, a utility type company, and I think you were setting up Bonded and I was going it alone probably about the same time. So 4 years ago we both set up at a similar time. What I do is I work with people and teams to get the best from people so that they can thrive in life, in their home life, but also at business. It's people, performance, productivity, then profitability, and it's amazing how many businesses out there forget about the people, and it's the people side of things that I focus on. The human connection, the forming of relationships that create sustainable growth in businesses. So that's what I'm about these days. Born and bred Whitley Bay, lived down the coast, always lived in the northeast, and I can't see myself moving away. To be fair.
And it's fair to say, though, you travel around the world now, don't you, to deliver the sort of leadership coaching and training and personal team development work that you deliver, as well as you've trained a number of the team members here at Bonded. I personally have been through the coaching as well, so which was a very, very valuable 3-day investment of time, I'd say. Absolutely. Before we talk more about that, I guess later in the podcast, perhaps it'd be useful to just go back a little bit and talk about where your current sort of professional focus came from, in particular in relation to connection. I know, for instance, leadership coaching isn't what you focused on for your full career. So perhaps if you could just take us back a bit to, more towards the start of your career and in particular, how connection may have played a role, and when you realised that it was sort of connection that you valued, if you like, within the professional life.
Yeah, I think realising how important connection was and reflecting back, I guess connection's always been important, but I didn't always realise it. I'm going to sound really old here. How long ago would it have been? 52 years ago, I had my first job at the age of, 42 years ago, at the age of 14. Oh. I worked for the Co-op. And I had a Saturday round delivering cream, double cream and whipped cream. And I would knock on people's door and try and sell cream to them. So I'd go out on my bike with this big tub of cream that I would carry around, and I would try and sell that and build up a customer base. Commission-only job, and you had to form relationships. And quite quickly I realised that when I was pleasant, when I was respectful, I made sure my bike was always parked at the edge of the drive rather than thrown on the lawn. I would ring the doorbell once and wait patiently. All of that kind of stuff was important in forming those relationships, being kind to people and being polite. And over time, that round got bigger and bigger and bigger, and I had to go out twice on my bike on a Saturday morning. So I think that's probably the first time that connection really, from a work point of view, but it was important at school as well. And at school, I generally had a good time at school, but I was born with hand eczema, quite severe hand eczema, and I was a little bit different to everybody else. And kids are bloody awful. to one another, aren't they? And guess what happened to me? I got picked on at school and bullied, and the name calling was at times absolutely relentless. So I think, reflecting back, I found myself working around different groups. I had a good set of friends at school, the kids I went to nursery with. They were in different sets and classes to me. So that left me trying to find where I fitted in, because not all kids were kind to me because I was a little bit different. So again, forming relationships, working out where I'd fit in, that was important as well. Mm-hmm. And actually my father, I remember when I was about 16, because I left school with no qualifications, partly I think because of the fact that school was challenging for that reason. I didn't really feel that I fitted in. Always. I had to work really hard at it. So I was perhaps concentrating more on that than I was the academic side of things. But I'll always remember my dad saying to me that when I left school with no qualifications, why don't you think about sales? Because you're great at building relationships. So that's probably the first time somebody actually had said to me the importance of relationships and connection.
And it's amazing thinking back to that sort of first job, if you like, and how you naturally built that belief around the importance, because you had to, I guess, with the nature of the work that it was. I can only imagine. Quite very, very early on, understanding the importance of interpersonal connection and how you communicate in a way to get a certain interaction and connection. And even at 16, you say, leaving school, what a valuable experience to have for then your father to be able to recognise that that's a skill that you had. And they're very powerful. I mean, I remember leaving university and not really knowing what I was good at. Well, I suppose finishing my undergraduate degree and then thinking, well, what do I do next? So to recognise that so early on within your life and that leading you into sales, which was that the next stage of your career, was it?
Well, I went into a company, and again, it's another part of where relationships played a part in my career journey. So I went on to what was called a youth training scheme. It was the place where people went to where you didn't have any qualifications. And I found that I got on well with the course lecturers. It was at North Tyneside College, grandly entitled Computer and Electronic Engineering. A very grand title for how to mend washing machines and fridge freezers. There was a bit of computer programming and stuff involved, but I found I got on really well with the college lecturers, who, by the way, I thought were ancient at the time, but they were probably only early 30s. But I got on really well with them. And one day, a local businessman came to the college wanting to get somebody for a placement, a 3-month placement in their business, small family firm. They sold fire detection systems, mm-hmm. and I was going in as the 5th person in that company as a kind of general helper. And I did all sorts of jobs. I was interviewed by this local guy. I'd been put forward by the college lecturers, just myself and one other. There was a good 60 people on this course. So those relationships that I'd built with those college lecturers, I genuinely believe is why I was put forward for that position and why I had that interview and why I was then taken on that 3-month placement, which turned into a 6-month placement. And after 12 months, Keith took me on as the 5th full-time member of his family firm.
Amazing.
So it was great, yeah.
And I think it's an understated viewpoint in business that I know the phrase like people buy from people. I think beyond that, even at our level, when we're pitching for business or we have businesses approach us, so often the final decision, because it's a competitive market we operate in, there's a number of good operators out there in addition to Bonded. It comes down to how the key decision maker or decision making unit feel, and how they feel about the individuals that they may or may not choose to work with. We often, in today's world, operate in sort of technology advanced, areas, high skill required, that the proliferation of data and all sorts of different elements that infuse that. But ultimately, the importance of people, is the constant, and the way that people make decisions is so influenced by how they feel about individuals. I still believe you need, as almost table stakes to be good, but like the difference is often, how that individual or those individuals feel about the individual or the team that they may or may not choose to move forward with in whatever capacity it is, and that seems to have played through in your experience there, where you got on well, and whatever decision making process they went through, that was a deciphering factor to it, that they felt that you were the best person to move forward with.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I see the opposite of that happening as well. There are some businesses out there that tender bits of work. So they'll go out to the market to find a third-party provider for whatever service it is. But it's very transactional. It's a black and white tender process. And in some sectors, they actually exclude the human connection. You can't even go in to present your bid to form those relationships. And what I found with those kind of contracts is that they have a time life, 12 months, 2 years, 3-year contract. Every 2 or 3 years, if they just go back out to tender in that transactional way, the likelihood of them switching supplier is high. So what enables a company to keep that business once they've got it is that human connection. You've got to work beyond the transactional side of things. That's what gets the sustainable growth. You've got to get under the skin of the contract terms and conditions and the KPIs. It's the relationship that keeps that customer.
100%. I completely agree. And I think for both parties in that scenario, the partnership that then develops from that. So like you say, it moves from being transactional to a partnership, and it's almost like 1 + 1 = 3, where the value of that then business relationship is far more valuable for the recipient of that service than just transactional, we pay you to do X. Particularly in professional services like we are as a sector, or to be able to truly understand the client's business. They're going to get a lot more value, and that should be. I'm strongly viewed that should be what the recipient, the client, should be striving for. They and unfortunately, I think within many sectors, such as public sector or whatever, there's probably people in that sector that would agree, but they're just sort of they're restricted on what they're able to, due to their internal processes. But it does hold those businesses back.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It stifles innovation. Rather than it being them and us, when you work together as a we, if we knew we could develop this relationship so that we could grow our business together by whatever percentage, how could we work together to make that more effective? That's very different to, me going into a business. Let's talk about the retail sector, supermarkets, for example. I remember so this is the opposite of being able to have a relationship with somebody. I used to go to meetings with some of the UK's largest supermarkets, and when you got there, they didn't want to know about Glenn or who I was or what I was about. They just wanted to go through the contract, KPIs, performance stats, metrics, etc., etc. It was so transactional, and that stifled the working together, and we didn't get as much out of those contracts as we could have done. I'm convinced of that.
So what took you from, just to sort of go back into your career and the journey you've been on, how did you develop from the point that you mentioned through to investing your career in the leadership and development side?
It's a great question. So the journey after fire alarms, I went from fire to water, and again through a relationship. So when I was in the fire alarm business, I worked for a number of companies, 3 companies, and in the last company I worked for, I had moved from being an installer for fire alarms into project management, into sales. And there was a girl in the office called Susan who used to do my typing for me, my quotations that went to the customer. So when I would wander around a building like this, I would use a tape recorder, record what I was seeing. That would go into a typing pool. I really am showing my age here. And Susan would type it up, and then that would get taken, and I would present that to the customer. Got on really well with Susan. She came to my wedding, and I had a great conversation with her husband on my wedding night at the bar. And 3 months later, I was working in the water industry.
Wow.
So again, through a kind of connection that I had, human connection, I went to work in the water industry. And I did that I was part of an Anglia Water Group. I was there for 20 years, and in various different business development roles, account management type roles, head of sales and marketing. And I ended up as a board member as one of their retail divisions. Now, in 2018, I met a lady in the Gherkin in London. And that was a meeting that I didn't know, but it was going to change my life. And it completely changed my life. And I was there by accident almost. So my CEO had been invited to this meeting in the Gherkin. It was a breakfast meeting. And I went along because she couldn't make it. She asked me to go in her stead. Get to the Gherkin and get to the top floor, walk into a room. There's 9 other CEOs in the room, and the founder of a program called The Living Leader, a lady called Penny Ferguson, and 9 other CEOs, all female. And it was a meeting which, when I say a meeting, it was a discussion for a couple of hours that absolutely changed my outlook on what leadership was all about. I thought I was a really good leader. You know, I ran some big teams, some fairly significant teams. I was okay at leadership. I was probably a great manager, but there's a difference between management and leadership. And one of the differences, I think, is getting that human connection right. You know, that's what differentiates sustainable leadership from transactional management. You know, management's about processes, procedures, KPIs, objectives. Leadership's about inspiring people and giving them freedom and trust to get on with stuff. And to do that, you've got to build relationships where people feel they can, you know, that they have got that trust, that they can put their thoughts, their ideas and opinions across. So that's kind of how I got to what I'm doing today. But the program that in 2018, after I'd met this lady, Penny Ferguson, I really, what she shared with me, within 2 hours, I saw leadership completely differently. So I paid to go on her course. And I enjoyed that so much, or took so much from it, that I went back to my CEO and said we could do with running this within our organisation. And that's what we ended up doing. So I trained to become a trainer, and we rolled that out in the company where I worked. And in 2020, I made the bold move, about the same time when you were setting Bonded up, to come and do it full time. So you mentioned earlier, I'm very fortunate enough now these days to do this all around the world. So a real privilege to be able to share and hopefully inspire people to get the point is to get the best from people so that they can influence the people around them, so that they too can get the best from the people. Because leadership's about our influence. And whenever we are interacting with somebody else, we've got an opportunity to influence them. And that's personal leadership. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. And you were very kind to invite us onto the programme. Not long after we'd gone live with the business. I think it was back in 2021, perhaps towards the end of 2021, we did the programme. And there's a fantastic programme, tons of detail that we went through within the 3 days, and brilliant that we've had sort of all the managers and above go through so far at Bonded. And it's really intrinsic to our culture, taking on board those sort of best practice principles. There's the one section that stands out above, out of many of the sections that we completed within those 3 day 3-day program, the Behind the Mask. Now, it was myself and a couple of my fellow founding directors that when I was on the program, I went on with, and amongst the group that we had, and those other directors I've worked with for 5 or 6 years in relatively close environment, but absolutely amazing to go through that Behind the Mask that is at the start of the program, and the way that it opens you up as individuals, as participants on that program, as delegates, to share and lower the barriers of worrying about communicating different aspects of your professional life or personal life. Is it possible to share a little bit more about the Behind the Mask bit? Yeah,
it's something that it reveals connection every single time. And I've ran over 90 programs now, and every time I find something that I've got in common with somebody else in the room. Also find something that surprises me. And what we do introductions in a way that many people don't do in business. And because we do it slightly differently, as you say, it kind of peels the layers of the onion off. It gets beneath the skin, and we get to see people differently. We all make assumptions about people when we first meet them, almost in seconds. We make judgments, and we make those judgments based upon our past, not on who they actually are. Excuse me. And the risk of that is that we start treating those people as if our assumptions are true, and most of the time they're not. Now, we think we know the people we work with. I'll just give you an example. I worked with a company about 12 months ago who, when I shared that we were going to do introductions and the format that we were going to do them in, the managing director almost leant across the table and said, "Glenn, we don't need to do this. We know each other really well. Actually, we've worked together for nearly 10 years. And he was pointing out one of his colleagues in the room. So I asked them to kind of humour me or go with it. One of the big things with the program I run is that you've got to come to it with an open mind. And I challenged them to do that. So they accepted that they would do that. The fourth person to go, I shared first to set the scene. The fourth person to go was this guy who'd worked with this other chap for 10 years. He shared that he was incredibly lonely in life. And you could almost hear the gasps in the room. It was there was a pin drop moment as well. But I didn't have a clue. But it started to explain some of the behaviours of this particular chap. This guy who was incredibly lonely in life, he wouldn't think twice about putting a 7:45 or an 8 a.m. start the day, quick catch up in the diaries for everybody. Or a wrap up on a Friday at 6:15 just to kind of close the week out, because he was incredibly lonely in life. It was driving some of his behaviours, and they didn't have a clue. So from that moment onward, they were able to support that guy differently. They put their arms around each other, and they were able to work more productively going forward and with a deeper understanding of each other. So that's just one example.
Amongst many, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I know in our session, I mean, there was, even with the colleagues that I mentioned, there was things that we learnt about one another, and then a couple of other delegates at least who very much opened up. Well, everyone opened up, but they, I think, surprised themselves almost with, what they shared, which set the tone for the coaching across the programme, and was a great element to employ, I'd say. Quite unique as well. I mean, I've done coaching or training sessions with other people, over the last 20 years, and I've never had that sort of approach at the start of a course. So yeah.
And as part of the debrief of that, doing that, let's call it an exercise, but doing those introductions in that way, I always ask people, why do you think we do it like that? What do you think we now have that we perhaps didn't have earlier on at the very start of today? And they come back with things like trust, a greater sense of understanding of who we are. We've created a safe environment. I feel that I'm able to share more openly now. some people will say, actually, I would never normally share that, but because you did, I was prepared to open up a little bit more. So you get much deeper understanding of the people in the room. And the benefit of that is that you're less likely to then make assumptions. Because if we make assumptions about people and we treat them as if those assumptions are true, well, I'll ask you this, how many times have you got to know somebody over a period of time and your opinion of them has changed?
Yeah, absolutely, frequently.
So the way we do introductions, exactly, the way we do them on this program, it's a shortcut. It gets, I wish I'd learned this a lot earlier on in my career. It really does allow you to get a deeper level of human connection a lot earlier. Therefore, that's healthy for good conversations, less assumptions being made, being in it together, trust, all that kind of stuff.
And those key aspects you mentioned there around trust and safe environment and that sort of authenticity behind the communication that's in that section that sets the tone for the rest of the programme, they're sort of key aspects of effective connection, on a human level. If you can create a safe environment and almost remove the concerns or whatever that may be, restrictions to connecting effectively, then it just aids and gives the right environment to connect, essentially. So thinking about the present and what you've learned over that journey of your career since starting back when you were 14 years old, is there anything, any sort of key takeaways for the audience or anything in particular that stands out from how you practice your coaching at the moment, or that you would say from a connection viewpoint you would recommend people think about, or something that's particularly important to you that you employ from your learnings through your career to date?
Yeah, again, another good question around what really is connection. And I think how we communicate is really important, right? And I think one of the challenges that people often have is they think they're communicating in a really supportive way, which is helping the individual. But often what they're doing is communicating in a way where their messages are landing differently to how they intend them. What I'm trying to say with this, as human beings, I think we genuinely care about other people. But often, because we care so much, we're very quick to give our advice, to suggest to people how I would do it, or tell someone that, do it this way rather than that way, or give them feedback on the things that aren't going well, and perhaps not looking at some of the stuff that's going really well. We pick them up for the things that aren't going quite well. Because they're all kind of natural traits. They get in the way of great human connection. When you make it more about the other person, what do you think? If you knew we could do this, how do you think we could go about achieving this? When you make it more about the other person, that's what, for me, forms that connection. So I always like to ask the question and pose to people to have a think about, is what about to come out of your mouth about you and your thoughts, or is it getting curious about them and their thoughts? And when you get curious about the other person and make it more about them, that, I believe, is what forms much deeper human connection that builds sustainable long-term relationships.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Glenn. I think we often overlook words as a tool, don't we, in terms of that communication piece, and as human beings generally, and don't think enough about how what you say may make the recipient think and feel essentially, and therefore act and remember and feel about you, and how that influences their behaviour thereafter. And I think, like you say, I'd agree. I think it's born from a place of goodwill, but just probably not execution in the right way.
Yeah.
I mean, that green and blue aspect to the coaching that you do, it's very much based around that, isn't it? That, try and be in the green as opposed to the blue.
Yeah, absolutely. Blue, to kind of putting it into those two chunks. There's 3 different blue communicating behaviours which are really important but can be overdone. And what we're saying is when we get into the green, they're more leadership behaviours. They are also really important, but difficult to overdo. And the green behaviours, it's, asking great questions. It's testing understanding. It's summarising. It's bringing people in. It's making sure that people don't come and go to meetings without having had a chance to give their thoughts, their ideas, their opinions. It's all that kind of great stuff, building on people's ideas that have been put forward. And when you focus more on that and because that's about them, when you get into the them space, that's what forms that deeper connection. Because when we're in the blue, and we've got to have a bit of blue, but if it's just about us telling all the time and giving our experience, our advice, remember, sometimes we do that because we care. But when you realise that the other person who's receiving that might not see it as caring. The other person might receive that you're actually sending them a message. Well, Glenn doesn't think I'm creative enough to think of this through myself. He doesn't think I can come up with the ideas. He's perhaps thinking I'm not wanting to take responsibility for this because he's always telling me or giving me his advice on how he would do it. So you're actually educating the other person not to think for themselves as well. So it's, the green and blue communications, it's another great part of the program I love to delve into. And it always surprises people because people think they're very green, they're very caring, they're very what we call theory Y, but actually the messages that they send are the opposite to that. People see them as and form beliefs that's the opposite of what the person's intending through their messages.
Brilliant. And I think as summary, like the key takeaway from that is that communication is so influential around the effectiveness connection essentially. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Glenn. It's been a great opportunity to chat, and thanks for sharing all your wisdom, and it's been brilliant to learn more about your journey, so thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed it, Steve. Been good to catch up as always.
Brilliant. Thanks, Glenn.